Our special holiday sermon series for December is entitled Witness to the Birth. And so far we've looked at Mary, treasures of the heart. Last week we looked at Joseph, doing the right thing. And this morning we want to look at the test of leadership. Some time ago I read this definition of leadership, and I'm interested in what you think of it. It goes like this. A leader is one who sees more than others see, that sees farther than others see, and sees before others see. And I like that quote. It sounds good. But I also have some problems with it. Because this quote tells me nothing about the character of this leader. The leader sees more, the leader sees farther, the leader sees before others see, but what does the leader see? And what will the leader do with what they see? And what's in the leader's heart guiding what they do? In his book, Developing the Leader Within You, best-selling author John Maxwell presents what he calls 5 levels of leadership. Level 1 is when people follow because they have to. It's one of those, I'm the boss, you're not, end of story. It's the lowest level of leadership. A step above that is level 2, when people follow because they want to. And here the leader is developing relationships. And there's camaraderie, and there's teamwork, and there's support. A step above that is level 3, where people follow because they appreciate what the leader does for the organization. And there's collaboration, and there's cooperation, and there's teamwork. Level 4, people follow because of what the leader does for them personally. And loyalty grows because this leader wants to make every person a better person. And then finally, at the very top is level 5, where people follow because of who the leader is. Character, integrity, morality, ethics. But when I read through those, I had to be honest and say, there's some levels below all of those. Below these 5, I found at least 3 other levels, like manipulation, where people follow because they're coerced into follow. They're backed into the corner. They're tricked into following. And further down is intimidation, where people follow because they're afraid not to follow. They may be emotionally or even physically attacked if they don't follow. And then, of course, at the bottom is force, where people follow because they're threatened. They're controlled, they're overpowered, they're conquered. Yes, there are so many different styles of leadership. And I wanted you to hear all of them because I find it very interesting that we have both ends of the leadership spectrum as witnesses to Jesus' birth. The December issue of National Geographic, the cover is about King Herod. The title is King Herod, Architect of the Holy Land. And the issue is about him as a builder. And he was a great builder, building all over, from Galilee all the way down to Idumea, on the coast all the way to the eastern side of the Jordan. But if you look at what he built, so many of his projects were planned and constructed to protect himself. Because he was a fearful, violent man. In fact, from Galilee in the north down through the Decapolis, Samaria, Judea, and Idumea, Herod built no fewer than 11 fortresses. Places that he could run to, he could flee, he could hide, find safety. Herodium, Masada, Machaerus. Why so many? Because his style of leadership was the bottom. Cruel, violent, ruthless. His close ties to Rome had taught Herod how to stay ahead of the game, how to anticipate and discover and eliminate any threats to his leadership. This is portrayed in the following video clip I want you to see as British actor Peter Ustinov plays the part of Herod in a conversation with two visitors from Rome.
King Herod, to revert to the Jews, I wonder, is it because, as you say, they identify future with past, that they have so many prophets?
Oh, the prophets, it's the sun which breeds them. Many of these are harmless. They preach religion. We let them go. But some of them preach rebellion because it is written. Altogether, literacy has had a disastrous effect in this country. And those we eliminate. Rome has taught us that although this may be indifferent theology, it is very good government.
Majesty, I've heard the word Messiah. What exactly is a Messiah?
Oh, even you have heard that awful word, Proculus.
Is he a prophet, or is he something even...
Well, Rome, even Rome cannot influence men's dreams. And the Messiah is a bad dream disguised as a solution to every problem. It's a leveler of scores, a rewarder of righteousness, a scourge for the wrongdoer. It is the bringer of everlasting peace.
That is, I understand from what you have said, a Messiah is worse than a prophet from the Roman point of view.
Oh, from the Jewish viewpoint, too. Only you try telling that to the Jews. No, don't. It's much wiser not to consult them just when a Messiah appears. Crush it underfoot like a young scorpion. Now you can tell great Augustus that he can rest in peace in Rome. There will be no messiahs, true or false, in Palestine while I am alive.
Now, of course, this particular story is fictitious. It's made up by Franco Zeffirelli. But the history behind it is not fiction at all. He mentions Augustus. Augustus was the first emperor of Rome. And history tells us that he was a personal friend of Herod. In fact, after becoming emperor, he confirmed Herod as the king of Judea. And he even added more territories to his kingdom. You see, Herod had been appointed king of Judea by the Roman Senate in 40 BC. And then 9 years later, he was confirmed after Augustus became emperor. And he ruled with an iron hand until his death in 4 BC. Even as a young man, Herod had great ability, and his skills were developing, and they became very clear as he grew older. He had a strong body, he had a quick mind. He knew how to use almost every kind of weapon, the bow, the spear, the javelin. He learned hunting and military tactics, and all of them served him very, very well. You see, after being made king of Judea, his first task given him by Rome was to retake Jerusalem. And he was 35 years old when he marched on Jerusalem with his Roman legions. His military strategy was brilliant, and he quickly took back the city for Rome, and he remained the undisputed king. He even wore a title that was given him by Rome, King of the Jews. You see, Herod's power was absolute in Judea. Anything he said became law. Anything that he decreed became reality. But to maintain his power, his leadership style was brutal and ruthless. He executed anyone that he suspected of wrongdoing. For example, just 2 years before the birth of Jesus, Herod executed his best loved wife. He had 10 of them. He killed her brother. He killed several of his sons, all because he was suspicious. And his friend, the Roman Emperor Augustus, is quoted in history as saying, "I would rather be one of Herod's pigs than one of his sons." Matthew tells the story of the beginning of Herod's leadership. In chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so I too may go and worship him." After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, of incense, and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Now, Matthew actually tells us two leadership stories. On one end of the leadership spectrum is Herod, paranoid, afraid, threatened by this child. But on the other end of the leadership spectrum are these wise men from the east, amazed, unafraid, drawn to this child. And in the next clip I want you to see, it shows the contrast as we watch these mysterious leaders from the east discuss the star that they follow.
I'm sure that Herod keeps a strict watch on his frontiers. He must know that we have crossed them. I would have to tell him, as Balthazar has said, that I follow that star wherever it leads.
But what will we find? All my calculations show that there was to be a new heavenly creature, a new star. It was even precise as to place and time. So I made up my mind to set forth and seek what they will unfold.
You did not know?
Only that it would be something wonderful. The stars are not distant and aloof, cut off from the lives of men. The rising of a new star entails an immense labor in the heavens that always has its counterpart on earth. The universe is about to bring forth a prodigy beyond our understanding.
Your star, my brother Balthazar, is indeed a sign of wonder. The divine Zoroaster says the next prophet will show himself in a foreign land, and the truth he will reveal will be at first only for his own people.
But there is only one truth.
And only one God. All the rest are vain, or parts of him.
The people of Israel know this. Many of their wise men have been close to him, and their writings confirm my calculations. A king is about to be born.
A king?
A king who will free us from the evils of this world.
Where will he be born?
The sacred writings point to a small town in Judea called Bethlehem Ephrata.
Matthew chapter 2 says that the wise men arrived from the east. And Herod had enemies in the east. In fact, he didn't trust people from that part of the world, or really any part of the world. The wise men said, "We have seen his star in the east." And this only confirmed Herod's fear, because there were stories that were widely circulated that at the births of Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great, that stars had appeared at that time. And you would think that the extraordinary nature of a miraculous star like this would touch Herod's soul, but it only made him more fearful and more suspicious and more determined to stamp out whatever was happening. The Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius report that people in and around the time of Herod were looking for a great king to come from among the Jews. And they anticipated the fulfillment of prophets in the Old Testament. Prophets like Isaiah and Daniel, or even Numbers chapter 24 that says a star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. And Herod should have been as wise as the wise men, but his leadership style was very different. He was too busy being Herod the Great to be Herod the Wise. He was too concerned with protecting his greatness. And so when the wise men did not return, he became very angry and fearful, overwhelmed. Matthew continues the story in verse 13 of chapter 2. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said. "Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and in vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. In one final video clip, Herod is in one of his fortresses, we don't know which one, and he's puzzled by this other style of leadership, as he at the same time lashes out with his own style of leadership.
They cross my border, yet not one of them sends a greeting. Are they armed?
Not heavily, Your Majesty. Our spies say they're equipped to travel fast and far.
But they were not heading here. If not here, where?
It was Bethlehem, Your Majesty. They followed a star. The new star.
Bethlehem? O thou Bethlehem Ephrata, thou art the smallest... What was that phrase again?
Thou, Bethlehem Ephrata, art a little one amongst the thousands of Judah. Out of thee he shall come forth unto me, who is to be the ruler in Israel, and his going forth is from the beginning, from the days of eternity.
A ruler in Israel? Have those travelers watched all the time? And bring me the names of all newborn children in Bethlehem. Those travelers crossed my frontier again.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Yes, Your Majesty. But the child must still be here. Kill every male child up to 1 year old. 2 years old. Better the innocent should die than that the guilty should escape.
Guilty? Your Majesty, a child?
Guilty in the womb! Guilty in the stars! I'll bring down their stars! I'll snuff them out in blood! This is my world! I will not share it with an infant! There's no room for two kings here, like a newborn scorpion and a foot! You know the mark of a real king? Courage! Even in the face of Jewish prophecy, bits of old parchment, old blind men! Ha! Now go to Bethlehem and make history! Kill!
But Your Majesty!
Kill! Kill them all! Kill! Kill them all!
This is my world. I will not share it with an infant. I have a video in my library entitled "In the Shadow of Herod." It was filmed on the site of his strongest fortress. In fact, he named it after himself, Herodium. And it was close enough to Jerusalem for Herod to make a quick escape if he needed to, but it was high enough in the hills to provide all the fortifications that he needed. And just 4 miles from Herodium was Bethlehem. And there are certain times of the day when Herodium, which was a hill, would cast its shadow on Bethlehem. And how ironic it is that today Herodium is a deserted ruins, a symbol of the deserted life of the leader Herod, when just a little ways away is a village that gave birth to a leader that still lives and guides people thousands of years later. You see, there is even yet another style of leadership that's even more important and contrasts even more greatly with Herod. And that's the leadership style modeled by Jesus himself. You see, Jesus was at the top of his game, creator of the universe, top of the ladder. And that's why so many find it ironic that he would practice leadership powerlessness. He would turn upside down our view of leadership. And he talked about it constantly. John chapter 13, a leader must stoop down and wash feet. Mark chapter 10, he told his 12, leaders, good leaders, must be servants. And the Apostle Paul described it with this picture of climbing down a ladder. Philippians chapter 2, verse 7, he writes, "But made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross." And here is Jesus' leadership style, climbing down the ladder of success for people. If you were to think of that ladder as rungs on a real ladder, the first rung down would be self-denial. Paul says in verse 7, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant. We could say Jesus was pulling rank in reverse order. You see, most people use their rank and they use their position to get ahead. But Jesus ignored His connections. What were His connections? Well, with God. And He ignored His connections and climbed down. And it's amazing how His attitude is so very different from today's demand for personal rights. The one person who could claim His rights and demand His rights waived His rights. The second rung down we could call self-adaptation. Verse 7, being made in human likeness. And Jesus was not an angel pretending to be a man. He truly became one of us, adapted, changed, came to where we are. And I find it staggering to consider the distance He traveled. The distance between verse 6, the nature of God, and verse 7, the nature of a servant. It's amazing. It's unimaginable. Self-denial, self-adaptation. And then verse 8, He humbled Himself. And this is the third rung down, self-surrender. The way up, the way to greatness is down, serving. Unself-consciousness, humility, flexibility. And one of the marks of a Spirit-filled leader is not self-assertion, but submission and surrender. Self-denial, self-adaptation, self-surrender, and finally the fourth rung down was self-sacrifice. Verse 8, He became obedient to death. Sadly, today, indulgence, not sacrifice, is the norm. C.S. Lewis has written in his book Miracles, in the Christian story, God descends to reascend. He comes down from the heights of absolute being into time and space, down into humanity, down further still to the very roots and seabed of the nature He has created. But He goes down to come up again and to bring the whole ruined world up with Him. Descending to ascend. Here's how Paul puts it in verses 9 through 11. Therefore God exalted Him to the highest place and gave Him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confessed that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. It's an amazing story of leadership. Today, Herod the Great's harbor is covered by the sea. Herod the Great's temple was destroyed by the Roman. Herod the Great's family was murdered, most of them by Herod himself. And all of his fortresses are archaeological ruins. Caught in his own selfish style of leadership, Herod never saw what the wise men saw. And when Jesus came, He trusted in His own greatness and never found God's greatness. You know what I learned from this? What is most likely to trip me up is myself. And what is most likely to trip you up is you. And that's why Jesus says, if any man would come after me, he must deny himself. He's saying, just give up what's going to be your greatest problem, you, and give yourself to Him. He'll do a much better job with you than you will ever do.